Atheism is defined as the disbelief of any god or afterlife. Atheism did not initially come to mind when thinking of underrepresented religions in the United States, but polls have shown that only 4% of the U.S. population identifies as atheist. Atheists also have, for the vast majority of recorded history, been despised, stigmatized, and oppressed. This stigmatism comes from an assumed lack of moral values, the association between atheism and Satanism, and the assumption that non-religious means anti-religious. What is it that pushes someone towards atheism, and how does that change happen? I interviewed John, and for him, like most people, it was a gradual change. Were you always non-religious or atheist, or what were you growing up?
I mean, I would say, I grew up in a Lutheran home. My parents are both, both Lutheran, but they were more on the liberal side, so they were not as intense as some of my classmates. I attended Trinity Lutheran School for kindergarten through 8th grade. I was also a regular attendant at Christ Lutheran Church. I was dual confirmed at both Trinity and Christ Lutheran Church. There was at one point I would have 5 hours of religious education, just religion school a day. I would go to chapel on Wednesdays. Also Wednesdays were the night I had to go to my other church, Christ Lutherans, confirmation, catechism courses, if you will. And then on Sunday, there were times I needed to do 2 church services plus Sunday school because I needed a worship report for both.
That's a lot.
So it was a lot.
Yeah.
So, by the time, I entered, once my sister went through confirmation, my parents started backing off and becoming more secularized, if you will. But I was really, really had a strong, profound knowledge of, the Christian Bible from the Lutheran perspective. I've read a good chunk of it. There were times I could name the 12 tribes of Israel. I would just swim circles around my other classmates, and stuff. My mom thought I was going to be a pastor. I was very involved with both the pastors. And then, what kind of, the first couple cracks, I would say, were when when certain media was coming out, that I knew was had nothing, they were very, Pokemon and Harry Potter were 2 very popular topics in the 90s, and they were saying that this leads to Satanism. I knew that I was obviously this is nothing to do with that, and they would push certain things and then certain video games and stuff like that. I'm especially when the time the school shooting started and Columbine and stuff, and they said James Bond is bad, this is bad, that and obviously it's this is not correlation to that,
right?
Witchcraft is no correlation to Harry Potter. These are far-fetched things, and they're saying we can't do this, but yet I was starting of the own mindset to say no. This does not correlate to that. That's maybe the first steps to be no, this is not that. And those are just instructors' biases, of course.
Right. So it wasn't until college that you went away from it. Can you?
Yeah. So the path of me where I started shifting gears actually came because of my good friend Tom and Howding and my brother, and both of those guys today are a different type of, I would say, atheists than I am. They're the kind of one to challenge people or to say this, or they'll correct people if they say God bless your day, or something or where it's instead of saying thank you, that's a nice gesture, or I appreciate your thoughts on that, or they would auto correct them, or with them, they also had the same upbringing I did. My brother and my good friend Tom, they went to the same church and Sunday school, so they had the exact same upbringing I did. They just had different reactions to it earlier on. And to get back to your point, they started punching holes in kind of what I was taught. And my course of action was to I got to get these guys back in the loop, if you will. So I started turning to history. I started turning to what I could uncover to kind of no, this is the reason why this is,
In the religious standpoint, you're trying to
right,
wrap them back in with
you know, and it's like, you know, and just try to bring, you know, points to bring them kind of back in actually. And the more I uncovered, or the more I, you know, and at the same time I was taking courses at the local UWMC in like, you know, anthropology, you know, astronomy. I was doing a lot of social studies at the time. I was at the time planning on being a teacher, social studies teacher, and I was taking a lot of those type of things. Those subjects interest me anyway. But, you know, and it's like, because we were always taught things like the Big Bang and like, you know, evolution were all wrong. And, you know, you very quickly get into courses where it's like, no, these things have general merit. And not only do they have general merit, they're almost like, aside from being, you know, they're without a doubt, you know, and you really like put, you know, truth to reason. What happened was I would time and time again try to back something up on my side, and I would be wrong and they would be right. I would try to do the research. I was wrong, they were right. And it wasn't like I'm an atheist. It was like a slow, gradual, you know, realization that, you know, the things that I thought and my mindset was not there.
Studies have shown that most people find atheism the same way that John did. They have found that deconversion appears to be driven by an intellectual impetus, by moral appraisals of beliefs and institutionalized religion, and by overcoming internal conflicts. Furthermore, this process does not occur in isolation, but rather within the context of family, friends, and community, and also the wider context of society as a whole. One could say that a person's progression into atheism is some proof of Tyler's theory of religious evolution. His theory was that people would eventually progress beyond religion as science progresses, and that science would be the new religion.
You know, as one matures and goes through adolescence into early adulthood, they experience life in different ways, and you kind of see things, you know, as more of an adult than a child, if you will.
Atheism brings its own unique struggle to the people that identify with it. In America, it is still deeply stigmatized. In the United States, atheists face a deeply religious populace that holds a powerful and resilient anti-atheist prejudice, outstripping its distaste for other stigmatized groups such as Muslims and homosexuals. A political poll done by Gallup before the 2020 election found that, when asked if they would vote for a candidate that was in a list of minority groups, atheist candidates only came in above a socialist candidate, with 60% saying that they would feel okay voting for an atheist. This is reflected in our government, where very few politicians are atheists or will say that they are atheist. This stigmatism seems to be due to a belief that someone that is non-religious is actually anti-religious. With my interview with John, that was not true with him.
In America, they don't want to say the word atheist. I think it's taboo.
Yeah.
I think it's like not pulling a Band-Aid off. But yet at the same time, if there was any type of evidence brought before me of a certain deity or something, having that completely 100% closed off mind is just as arrogant as someone who's set in their beliefs.
Sure.
You know, it's human nature to want to preserve yourself. It's human nature to want to believe you're something more than what you are. You also, you know, it gives people a good sense of hope.
Right.
You know, and it gives a sense of community. You know, and, you know, I've never, you know, my experience in going through all that religion, I wouldn't trade it away. You know, I feel like it's part of who I am, you know, like my upbringing, if you will. You know, and, you know, like the friends and relationships I made along the way, you know, and still to this day have a lot of, you know, friends, classmates, whatever, that went through and have still very polarized, opposite views of me, and that's perfectly fine. And, you know, that's what makes people unique and it diverse, if you will. So I think like a good point to say, like, you don't have to be an absolute way about things, you know.
How did like your family take it as you became more non-religious and atheist? Was it kind of okay because your brother kind of did that first?
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's much more like a militant approach to it, whereas like
maybe what was the reaction when Reed was like that? Were they upset? Was it?
I was more upset. I mean, then you know, like my mom looked to me actually to kind of like correct it, if you will. It wasn't, like I said, it was a gradual thing. It was a very gradual thing. It took a couple of years, I think if I had to pick a specific incident, I remember going out to eat with my grandma in Rhinelander, and I just like, it almost kind of felt like, in a way, like, kind of like, I don't want to say coming out because that's not really indicative, but it's like, it felt like like, hey, this is who I am, and this is like my thought process on this, and
it's kind of like a coming out, like
because people's view of you permanently changes,
right? And like you said earlier, it's like the word atheist is kind of like a taboo word or like a bad word,
right? And people don't want to say, they just don't want to commit to it. It's like, oh, I'm agnostic, because that kind of leaves that little crack of the door open. That's why I don't really tend to do that, because it's like, no, this is I would love to, when I die, wake up somewhere and be some form of energy. Who knows? I can't predict that. We could, it could. There's no way to dictate it.
Right.
We were in a nice restaurant, and my grandma, she was very kind of taken aback, first of all, and it was like, kind of difficult for her at first, but it was like, and she got a little mildly upset, about it, and I was just like, I tried to kind of like say it in the framework that I've been talking in, and it still was kind of like you'll come around kind of thing. Like I don't know, it's like people initially have something like that. Like, no, you'll figure it out.
I was very curious on how John handled traditionally religious events in his life after becoming an atheist. He is married, had a wedding, and continues to celebrate Christmas with his family.
First of all, we had my dad's best friend as our officiant. We tried to make it as non-religious as possible. We did throw a few lines in there, for more or less family members. We did a binding knot, which was a traditional Celtic tradition.
A hand fasting ceremony is traditionally Celtic in origin, where the bride and groom's hands are tied together. This is more often seen in Wiccan and pagan ceremonies, but is becoming more popular in traditional ceremonies.
We incorporated a lot of, we try to make it more emphasis about the couple and not, the woman subjecting herself before her husband and God, kind of thing. Right. That just feels draconian in a way to me.
How do you feel about like Christian holiday celebrations with your family? Because it's such and not like just ingrained in our society, but also if your parents are still Christian, like how do you feel about those?
Well, I feel like you should obviously respect the people that you're around. Obviously, this means a lot to them for different reasons. I feel that, just because my point of view doesn't, I don't want to, wouldn't want to over-subverse my own attitude over, the enjoyment of their holiday.
Right. Do you still celebrate? You still celebrate Christmas?
Yeah, no, all holidays, it's just, but if you look at all the holidays, a lot of them have backings and other, Santa Claus, was originally like Odin, his reindeer were his, eight-legged,
more backing and more like
right. They come from other things, like
things,
pagan holidays, Saturnalia, or you look at like Easter versus like Easter, they have pagan roots, and obviously the ones in power, create the rules. So it's as the Christians, dominated other groups in Europe and eventually into North America, their traditions became, what was standard of the time.
When the Christians started to take over cultures and religions around the world, they denounced inhumane pagan practices, but at the same time took over pagan temples and converted them to churches. They replaced the old gods in popular devotion with heroic martyrs of the persecutions, and they replaced the holy days of paganism with festivals of the Christian year. When I asked John if there were any aspects of Christianity that he missed, he did state that the community he had through church was his favorite aspect and is something that he misses that atheism does not have. When asked if there were any organized atheist groups, he said that the closest thing that atheists have is the Church of Satan.
Is there like an organized version of atheism, like organized sect of it? Like, I've heard of the Church of Satan, but I don't know if that falls under that, what that's about.
No, like the Church of Satan, like the Book of Satan. That's not. First of all, it's not Anton LaVey. I want to say his name is. Yeah. No, he had his own thoughts, and that's not. That's I think almost. A lot of the stuff that he did it's not really indicative, to anything I believe at all. I feel like he was more or less trying to get a reaction from people or try to, establish a counterweight, if you will, to the order of things, if you will.
The Church of Satan is an organized group of atheists with a high priest. The church was founded in 1966 and is based off the writing of Anton LaVey's The Satanic Bible. They do not worship Satan, but see him as a symbol of liberty and individualism. They believe all gods are creation of the human mind and that worshiping any god is worshiping the man that made it up. There can be an association with Satanism and atheism, which only adds to the stigmatism of being atheists. It is true that people who are members of the Church of Satan are atheists, but not all atheists are Satanists. Another reason for the stigmatism towards atheists is that people feel like they cannot trust them. There tends to be the assumption that, since they do not have any religion to steer their ethical values, atheists will have no ethics or morals. According to another poll done by Pew Research Center in 2019, 44% of Americans believe that a belief in God is necessary for morality. In a study done to analyze the difference in morals between believers and non-believers by University of Chicago psychologists, it was found that there are minimal differences between the two groups and their morality.
Also think that, having yourself be the master of your own destiny rather than some other figure motivating you to do those things is much more enriching and fulfilling as well. I think that, when so many people do good things out of religion, they're doing it for like a benefit, to be like, this will get me in heaven, or they'll do because of that. And it's really not as genuine. It's not coming from a genuine place.
Interesting.
If atheists have the same morals as people who do believe in God, do their beliefs on other societal issues differ?
My thought process was very different. My views on homosexuality, just in general, were different. Abortion was different. My views on, just everything, just much more, you're kind of ingrained to what the environment you're put in. And, things were very different in the mid-90s when I was attending these schools on a lot of those issues too.
Right. Atheists tend to have very liberal beliefs when it comes to gender and sexual orientation. Since views against homosexuality are generally based on religious beliefs, atheists tend to believe that people are free to do what they want as long as they're not hurting others. According to a Pew Research Center poll, 94% of atheists that were asked said that homosexuality should be accepted, versus 54% of Christians saying it should be accepted. Atheists are also more liberal when it comes to their views on gender and sexuality. In the same study done by Pew Research Center, 76% of atheists polled said that gender can change from what you were assigned at birth, while only 38% of Americans agreed with that statement. To close out my interview with John, I asked him how he planned to raise his child when it comes to religion.
How do you plan to raise your children when it comes to religion?
Let them experience life. Obviously guide them and give them objective, feedback. I don't intend on sugarcoating things. Obviously be supportive and respectful. If they start having differing views, you always, just with anything, you don't want to come out and be like, no, this is the way it is. Because that can be much more harmful, and you can ruin relationships on that. Obviously, with my son, I would want him to feel what he feels is right. Am I going to take him to different types of church services? No. It's like, if he has questions, I will try to explain with the best of my capabilities what I think. And he can make his own decisions henceforth from there.
Would you be opposed to him going to church services with no? Okay.
A study done in 2019 found that this practice was becoming much more common and that more younger parents were raising their children without religion. If other atheist families are raising their kids in the same open way that John is planning, will this lead to more atheists in our society or to an even more diverse range of religions since they will be able to choose their own? I sincerely enjoyed my time talking with John about atheism and learning more about it. I did not realize that it was an uncommon belief and so looked down on by many people. Atheism tends to be a quiet belief and not often discussed. The negative connotations that go along with it are mostly untrue. Most atheists are just non-religious, not anti-religion. Very few atheists also identify as Satanists, and even those don't believe in or worship Satan, and they have the same morals as religious people. All in all, it would be very beneficial to our society to have more people as socially liberal and open to others as atheists are.